I never thought I'd hear those words from my own son-in-law. "You're worthless, Marie. You don't even deserve to be here." It happened so fast, so unexpectedly. One minute, we were talking about the garden, and the next, Jason's voice was a knife to my chest, slicing through everything I thought I knew about my family. But it wasn't just the words that hurt. It was the way he said them, like I was nothing. Like I didn't matter. And there, in the kitchen with my daughter, Claire, standing beside him, the truth hit me like a freight train. My family was falling apart. And I was about to find out just how deep the betrayal went. Before I tell you what happened next, would you do me a favor? Hit that subscribe button, turn on the little bell, and let me know where you're watching from. It really helps us know where these stories are reaching. I've spent years raising my children, giving everything I had to keep the family together. I was the one they'd turn to for comfort, for advice, for everything. But that night, all of it seemed to crumble in front of me. Jason, my son-in-law, who I once thought of as a part of the family, wasn't just disrespecting me. He was trying to tear everything down. He wasn't a fool, and neither was I. He knew just what to say to cut me down. And worse, my daughter, Claire, stood by and let it happen. My heart pounded in my chest, not just from the shock of his words, but from the anger boiling up inside me. This wasn't just about him anymore. This was about my pride, my dignity, and my place in this family. How could Jason, a man I had welcomed into my home, treat me this way? And how could my daughter, the one I'd spent my life protecting, let him? I'd spent years thinking I was safe, that my family was solid, that no one could come between us. But the cracks were already there, and I was too blind to see them. I would never forget that moment, standing there in my own kitchen, fighting to hold back the tears. And in that moment, I made a promise to myself: I would get to the bottom of this. I would find out what Jason was hiding, and I would make sure he never had the chance to hurt me, or my family, again. The next morning, I started my investigation. It was clear to me now that there was something Jason wasn't telling us. And I wasn't about to sit back and let him get away with it. My family had already betrayed me once. This time, I would make sure the truth came out. No matter what it cost. Late that night, after everyone had gone to bed, I sat in the dim light of my living room, the weight of what had happened still heavy on my chest. My hands trembled slightly as I pulled out Jason's files from the drawer where I knew they'd be. At first, I wasn't sure what I was looking for, just a sense of understanding, something to explain why this had all happened. But as the hours passed and the house grew quieter, I felt something else building inside me. It was a fire, burning with determination. I wasn't just going to figure out what Jason was hiding, I was going to make him pay. I clicked through the files, the hum of the computer the only sound in the otherwise silent house. The more I read, the more I realized how deep the rabbit hole went. Jason wasn't just a man with a temper. He was a man with a plan. Hidden bank accounts, unusual transfers, everything pointed to something more than a simple argument gone wrong. There were receipts for transactions I didn't recognize, ones that didn't make sense. And then, I found it, a deposit of over $50,000, transferred from an account in my name to one of his. My blood ran cold as I stared at the screen. The money wasn't just a transfer. It was a theft. Jason had been siphoning money from me for months. How could he? He'd always claimed to be struggling with bills, telling me he couldn't make ends meet, asking for loans here and there. I thought I was helping him, but it turned out I had been a fool. A fool who trusted the wrong person. I wasn't about to let this slide. Not now, not ever. My heart ached, but the anger inside me fueled my resolve. I knew I needed to act fast. If I didn't, he'd slip through my fingers just like he'd done with the money. I printed the documents, my fingers pressing the paper with a sense of finality, knowing I now held the proof that could tear my family apart. But there was one more piece I needed: a conversation with Claire. I had to hear it from her. The woman who'd stood by Jason's side in that moment of betrayal. I couldn't face her until I knew exactly what was happening in her head. Did she know about this? Was she complicit in Jason's scheme? Or had she, too, been in the dark? Tomorrow, I would have to face her. But tonight, I sat back and took a deep breath. The war had begun, and I wasn't backing down. The next morning, as I sat in the kitchen sipping my coffee, the silence between Claire and me felt like a thick fog. She had always been my girl, my baby. But that morning, she felt like a stranger. Her face was pale, her eyes avoiding mine as if she knew what was coming. The betrayal in her eyes was as sharp as a blade, and yet, I had to face it. I couldn't look away any longer. "Claire," I began, my voice softer than I intended. "I need to know the truth. Did you know about the money? About Jason's other accounts?" She froze, the spoon she was stirring in her coffee cup clinking against the edge of the mug. Her face went even paler, and I could see her struggle to find the right words. For a moment, I thought she might deny it. But she didn't. Mom, I didn't know," she whispered, her voice shaky. "I had no idea. Jason told me everything was fine with the finances. He said you were just helping him out. With small loans, nothing big." Don't lie to me, Claire," I cut her off. "You knew something wasn't right. I can see it in your eyes. I've raised you better than this." She flinched, the words hitting her harder than I intended. But I couldn't stop myself. The disappointment was too much. She had stood by Jason, her husband, her family, and let him tear apart everything we had. And now, she wanted to pretend she didn't know? Pretend that everything was just fine? "Mom, I never meant to hurt you," she pleaded, her voice breaking. I was just trying to keep the peace. I thought maybe if I just went along with him, everything would calm down. I didn't want to cause trouble." Her words stung more than they should have. Peace? Was that what she thought was more important than truth? Than family? "I raised you to value honesty, Claire. To value family. What happened to that?" I asked, the anger in my voice now spilling out. "You should have come to me. You should have known better than to let him pull you into his lies." She bit her lip, trying to hold back tears, but it was no use. Her pain mirrored mine, and for a moment, I wasn't sure if I should hug her or walk away. The betrayal was too much, but the love I had for her was still there, deep down, buried under all the hurt. Could I ever forgive her? Could I forgive Jason? "I need space to think," I said, my voice softer now, the fight drained from me. I didn't know what else to say. I had so many questions, but none of them would be answered until I knew what Jason was really after. Claire nodded, her face a mix of guilt and confusion. She didn't try to stop me as I stood up and walked out of the room, leaving her sitting there, lost in her thoughts. That I knew one thing for sure, this family wasn't going to be the same anymore. Jason had shaken it to its core, but Claire had played her part. It hurt to admit, but I couldn't keep pretending everything was fine. Not anymore. The weight of the truth settled heavy in my chest as I sat at the kitchen table, the documents in front of me like the evidence of a crime I never saw coming. Jason's betrayal wasn't just personal, it was financial. And I wasn't going to let him get away with it. I had to take action, not just for myself, but for my family. I couldn't let Jason tear us apart any longer. The first thing I did was contact a lawyer. I knew it wouldn't be easy. Legal battles never were. But I also knew that if I didn't act now, I would lose everything. The house, the savings, everything I had worked for over the years. It wasn't just about the money, it was about justice. And if Jason thought he could get away with this, he was wrong. By the time I stepped into the lawyer's office, I felt like I was in a fog. The weight of the situation was pressing down on me, but there was no turning back. The lawyer, a calm woman named Laura, greeted me with a firm handshake and a reassuring smile. But I could see the concern in her eyes as I explained everything, how Jason had manipulated me, how he had transferred money from my accounts into his own, and how my daughter, Claire, had been complicit without even realizing it. "It's a strong case, Marie," Laura said after going over the paperwork. "But you need to be prepared. Legal battles like this can get ugly, and it might strain your relationship with your daughter." I nodded, my heart heavy. I had already felt the distance growing between Claire and me, but this was going to break her. But I had no choice. I couldn't let Jason win. Not this time. The first step was filing a formal complaint. Laura prepared the necessary paperwork, and we went over it together. I signed the forms with trembling hands, but there was something else in me now, something stronger than the fear that had been there before. I wasn't just a victim anymore. I was taking control. We set the court date for the following month, and with each passing day, the reality of what I was about to face became clearer. But I didn't have the luxury of time. The longer I waited, the more Jason could cover his tracks, the more he could manipulate the situation. I had to move fast. I had to outsmart him. I spent the next few weeks gathering more evidence. Every document, every phone call, every transaction, I was building a case. Jason wouldn't see me coming. He wouldn't even know what hit him, but the hardest part was still to come. I had to face Claire. I had to tell her what I was doing, that I was fighting not just for my money, but for the truth. And that meant I would have to confront her again. I didn't know if she would stand by me or if she would side with Jason. But one thing was certain, I was no longer afraid of the truth. No matter how much it hurt, the night before the court date, I couldn't sleep. My mind was racing, thoughts swirling like a storm. I kept replaying the moment Jason had called me worthless, the words that had shattered everything. Now, as I prepared for the legal battle ahead, I wondered if I was doing the right thing. But then I remembered the documents, the money, the lies. There was no turning back now. The next day, as I walked into the courtroom, my hands were clammy, my heart thudding in my chest. I had prepared myself for the worst, but nothing could have prepared me for the moment when Jason stood in front of me. His face, once so familiar, now looked foreign. His eyes shifted nervously as he sat beside his lawyer. I could almost hear his thoughts. He knew the game was up, the proceedings began. And everything felt like a blur, witness statements, legal jargon, arguments that all seemed so distant from the raw emotions I was feeling. But then, in the middle of the hearing, something unexpected happened. Jason's lawyer called for a recess, and when we reconvened, Jason had something to say. "I'm sorry, Marie," Jason said, his voice surprisingly steady, though there was a tinge of fear in it. "I didn't mean for it to go this far. He paused, glancing nervously at the table, as if unsure of how to continue. "I never meant to hurt you. I thought I could handle everything, but it all spiraled out of control." The words hung in the air like an uninvited guest. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Jason, the man who had manipulated me, who had drained my bank accounts, was apologizing? It didn't feel real. I had prepared myself for a fight, for a man who would deny everything, but here he was, admitting to what he'd done. "I should have come to you," he continued, his voice breaking slightly. "But I didn't. I got too wrapped up in everything, trying to keep up the act, pretending everything was fine. I'm sorry, Marie. I truly am." For a moment, I didn't know what to say. My mind was spinning. Was this genuine? Or was it just another ploy to get me to back down? But there was something about the way he said it. The remorse, the vulnerability, it was almost enough to make me hesitate, but then I remembered the countless nights I had spent wondering why I had let this happen. Why had I trusted him? Why hadn't I seen through the lies sooner? "You can't take it back, Jason," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "I don't care about your apology. What you did, it's unforgivable." The courtroom was silent. Jason's lawyer shifted uncomfortably in his seat. Claire, who had been sitting quietly at the back, looked at me, her eyes wide with confusion. But I wasn't focused on her now. My attention was on Jason, on the man who had stolen from me. From all of us. "I've got the evidence, Jason. You can apologize all you want. But it doesn't change what you've done," I said, holding up the stack of documents I had been gathering. "And you won't get away with it." Jason's face fell, the color draining from his skin. He wasn't expecting this. I could see the fear in his eyes now. And it felt good, finally knowing that I had the upper hand. The tables had turned, but there was still one more thing I needed to know. The truth about Claire. Had she been involved in this? Did she know all along? I turned to my daughter, who had been silent through all of this. Her face was pale, her lips trembling as she avoided my gaze. I couldn't read her anymore. She had always been my baby, but now? Now, she was part of this mess. "Claire," I said softly, "what do you know about this?" Her head snapped up at the sound of her name, and for the first time, I saw the full weight of guilt on her face. It was as if the whole world had suddenly collapsed on her shoulders. I didn't know," she stammered, her voice breaking. "I didn't know how far it had gone. But I knew something was off. I didn't want to believe it, Mom. I didn't want to face it. I was just scared. Her words echoed in my ears, but the shock of it all left me speechless. Was she really as innocent as she claimed? Or was she just another victim in Jason's twisted game? The confession hung in the air like a cloud of smoke, and I could hardly breathe as I tried to digest what Jason had just said. Part of me wanted to believe him, wanted to believe that his apology was genuine, that maybe, just maybe, there was a chance for reconciliation. But the other part of me, the part that had been through the pain, the betrayal, the sleepless nights, it couldn't let go so easily. Jason had crossed a line that couldn't be undone with words. The court session ended in a recess, but I couldn't shake the unease that had settled over me. Was this just the calm before the storm? Jason's confession might have been a strategic move, an attempt to take some of the heat off himself. But I wasn't about to fall for it. I spent the next few days meticulously going over the evidence. Every detail mattered. The receipts, the transfers, the hidden accounts, each one telling a story, each one adding another layer to the betrayal. But something else struck me too. Jason had been too careful, too calculating. There were documents he hadn't shown me, things that, if I'd missed them, would have sealed my fate. But I had been thorough. This wasn't just about the money anymore. This was about exposing everything he had been hiding from the very beginning. Then, just as I was about to organize everything for the final court hearing, something unexpected happened. I received an email from Claire. "Mom, I need to talk to you. Please don't do this. Jason's not the man you think he is. I'll explain everything. Please let me explain." I stared at the screen, my heart pounding in my chest. Was she finally coming clean? Or was this just another attempt to protect Jason? I called her immediately, needing to hear her voice, needing to know where her loyalties really lay. "Claire," I said when she picked up, my voice barely controlled, "what is this? What are you really trying to tell me?" "I've been talking to Jason," she said, her voice shaking. "He's been saying things I didn't want to believe. But I can't keep lying to myself anymore, Mom. He's been hiding more than just the money. He's been using me, too." I didn't know what to do. Her words were a knife in my chest. It wasn't just the financial betrayal anymore. It was the fact that she, my own daughter, had been swept up in Jason's lies, just like I had. "I never wanted to hurt you, Mom. I swear," Claire continued, her voice breaking. "I thought I could fix things, but I can't. Not by myself." I wanted to scream. I wanted to tell her everything I had been feeling, the anger, the hurt, the sense of betrayal. But instead, I took a deep breath. This was the moment I had been waiting for. The truth was finally coming out. And with it, I had one chance to turn everything around. "I'm not going to back down, Claire," I said, my voice firm but not unkind. "Jason has to answer for what he's done, and so do you. We need to deal with this, together." There was silence on the other end of the line before Claire finally spoke again. "I'll help you, Mom. I swear I will. I don't know how to fix this, but I'll try." I hung up, feeling a strange sense of relief mixed with doubt. Could I really trust her again? Could I trust myself not to fall into the same pattern of enabling? But I knew one thing for sure, I couldn't let Jason get away with this any longer. The tables had turned. Now it was my turn to take control. With Claire on my side, the final piece of the puzzle was in place. I had everything I needed to expose Jason for who he truly was, not just a liar and a thief, but someone who had manipulated everyone around him to get what he wanted. I wasn't about to let him win. The next court hearing was just around the corner, and I knew it would be the ultimate test. But for the first time in a long while, I felt confident. I had the evidence, I had the truth, and I had a plan. Jason had underestimated me before. Now, I was going to make sure he never did again. The days leading up to the next court date were filled with a strange mixture of hope and dread. I had everything lined up, the evidence, the testimonies, and the support of my daughter, Claire, who was finally seeing the truth of what had been happening. But as the court date drew nearer, I couldn't help but wonder, was it enough to fix what had been broken? Claire and I hadn't spoken much in the days following our phone call. She had apologized profusely, but the damage had already been done. The wound between us was still fresh, still bleeding. How could I look at her the same way after everything that had happened? How could I trust her again, knowing she had stood by Jason for so long? The night before the hearing, I couldn't sleep. The weight of everything pressed down on me like a vice, squeezing out any hope of peace. I had spent my life protecting my family, and now, I was faced with the possibility of losing it all, the trust one had in my daughter, the family I had spent years building. What was I even fighting for anymore? The next morning, I drove to the courthouse, my hands gripping the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles were white. I wasn't sure what I was expecting, but when I walked into that courtroom, I didn't expect Claire to be there. She was sitting in the back, her eyes red and swollen as if she hadn't been sleeping either. When she saw me, she stood up, and for a moment, I thought she was going to walk out. But instead, she walked toward me, her steps slow, hesitant. "Mom," she said, her voice shaky. "I'm so sorry. I should have never let Jason do this. I should have trusted you." Her words hit me like a tidal wave. I had been preparing myself for this moment, but nothing could have prepared me for the rawness of her apology. The guilt in her eyes, the brokenness in her voice, it was too much. I could feel my resolve start to crack, the anger and hurt threatening to spill over. I wanted to stay angry. I wanted to tell her that I couldn't forgive her, that she had betrayed me in the worst way possible. But instead, all I could do was stare at her, trying to make sense of everything. How could she have been so blind? How could she have let this happen? "I don't know how to fix this, Mom," she whispered, taking a step closer. "But I'm here. And I want to help. I'll do whatever it takes to make it right." I could see the sincerity in her eyes, but I wasn't sure if I was ready to forgive her. I wanted to, so badly, but the pain was still too fresh. I didn't say anything right away. Instead, I reached out and touched her arm. Feeling the warmth of her skin, reminding myself that she was still my daughter. Still the person I had raised. "You've got a long way to go, Claire," I said quietly, my voice cracking. "But I'll be here when you're ready to make it right." She nodded, tears welling in her eyes. I could see how much she regretted everything, but I also knew that forgiveness would take time. It wouldn't come easily, and it certainly wouldn't happen overnight. The courtroom doors opened, and I knew the moment had arrived. It was time for the next chapter of this fight. But as I walked to my seat, I realized that the real battle wasn't in that courtroom. It was inside me. Could I forgive my daughter? Could I rebuild the trust we had once shared? Only time would tell. But one thing was certain, I wasn't going to let Jason win. Not now, not ever. The day of the hearing had arrived, and the atmosphere in the courtroom was tense, almost suffocating. I walked in, holding my head high, though inside, I could feel the weight of everything bearing down on me. This wasn't just about money anymore. This was about justice. It was about standing up for myself, for my family, and for everything that had been taken from me. Jason was already seated at the defendant's table, his lawyer beside him. He looked as smug as ever, as if he still had the upper hand. But I knew something he didn't. I wasn't the same woman he had belittled just weeks ago. I had come a long way since that fateful night when he called me worthless. Now, I was ready to take him down, not out of spite, but out of necessity. As the hearing began, I could see the cracks in Jason's facade. His lawyer tried to discredit the evidence, but I knew better. The documents I had gathered, the bank transfers, the hidden accounts, they were undeniable. And I wasn't backing down. Jason's eyes kept flicking nervously to the papers his lawyer was shuffling, as if he could make the truth disappear with a quick glance. But the truth had a way of staying where it belonged. And I was about to make sure it stayed there, right in front of everyone in that room. The judge, a stern woman with sharp eyes, listened attentively to both sides. Jason's lawyer made his case, arguing that the transfers were a mistake, that I had somehow misunderstood the situation. But every time he spoke, I could feel the tension in the air. The truth was on my side, and no amount of fancy words could change that. Then it was my turn. I stood up slowly, my knees slightly shaking but my heart pounding with determination. I walked up to the witness stand, holding my head high. My voice, when I spoke, was steady, even though my emotions were anything but calm. "I never wanted this," I began, addressing the court. "I trusted Jason. I welcomed him into my home, into my family. But he betrayed me. He took what was mine, and he lied to all of us. He didn't just steal money. He stole my trust, my dignity, and my family's peace. I could feel the weight of those words in my chest, but I said them anyway. I wasn't just speaking for myself. I was speaking for every person who had ever been manipulated, used, or taken advantage of. I looked directly at Jason as I spoke the next part. And I won't stand by and let him get away with it. Not anymore. The silence in the courtroom was deafening as I finished. I felt a strange sense of peace wash over me, the kind of peace that comes when you've finally spoken the truth. Jason sat there, eyes wide, his smug expression replaced with something else, fear. Then, just as the judge was about to adjourn the court for a recess, a startling twist happened. Jason stood up, his chair scraping loudly against the floor, and spoke up in a shaky voice. "I'm guilty," he said, the words tumbling out in a rush. "I never meant for it to get this far, but he paused, his face flushed with a mixture of shame and fear. "I've been lying to everyone. The money, the accounts, it was all me. I didn't know what to do anymore. But I never meant to hurt anyone." His words hung in the air, and for a moment, I didn't know what to think. Was this another attempt to get sympathy? Or was he finally admitting the truth? The judge called for a short break, and as the room cleared out, I turned to Claire, who had been sitting quietly in the back. She was watching me closely, her face unreadable. I could see the pain in her eyes, but also something else, regret. And maybe, just maybe, the first steps toward reconciliation. The truth had come to light, but there was still more to be done. The court case wasn't over, but for the first time in weeks, I felt a sense of closure. Jason had finally admitted to his wrongs, and though that wasn't enough to heal the damage he'd done, it was a start. When the court resumed, the judge delivered her verdict. Jason was ordered to pay restitution, and his financial records would be monitored for the foreseeable future. It wasn't the harshest punishment he could have received, but it was something. And it was justice. But as I left the courtroom that day, I realized that justice wasn't just about legal action, it was about finding peace within myself. I wasn't going to let Jason's actions define me. I wasn't going to let them break me. The hardest part was over. The truth had been revealed. Now, it was time for me to rebuild, to heal. And to find the strength to move forward. The days after the court ruling were a blur. The legal battle had come to a close, but the emotional one was just beginning. Jason had been held accountable, but there was still the matter of what I had lost, the trust in my family, the confidence I had in the people closest to me. Those things couldn't be fixed with money or a legal verdict. They were scars that time would have to heal, if they ever would. Claire and I hadn't spoken much after the trial. I didn't know what to say to her, and I wasn't sure if she knew what to say to me either. The walls between us were still high, built on years of unspoken words and hidden truths. But I wasn't going to let that stop me from moving forward. I had spent too much of my life worrying about everyone else to forget about my own needs, my own peace. It was a Saturday morning when I decided to take a walk to clear my head. The sun was shining, the sky a brilliant blue, and everything seemed so ordinary, so peaceful. Yet, everything inside me felt fractured. I had to remind myself that I wasn't just walking for clarity. I was walking for healing. The familiar route through the neighborhood brought back memories of happier times, of birthday parties, of family gatherings, of moments when life had seemed so much simpler. But as I walked, I couldn't ignore the ache in my heart. How could I let go of the hurt? How could I ever trust again? My thoughts were interrupted when I heard a voice call out behind me. "Mom!" I turned around to see Claire running toward me. She looked older somehow, like she had been carrying the weight of the world on her shoulders. She stopped in front of me, breathing heavily, as if she had run all the way to catch up with me. "Can we talk?" she asked, her voice tentative. I nodded, my heart beating faster than I wanted it to. I didn't know if I was ready for this, but I had to be. For her. For me. We sat on the bench in the park, the silence between us heavy and awkward. Finally, Claire spoke, her words coming out in a rush. "I don't know where to start," she said, her eyes downcast. "I've been so lost, Mom. I let Jason's lies take over everything, and I didn't see it until it was too late. I've hurt you in ways I can't even explain." I could see the guilt in her eyes, but I wasn't sure if it was enough to heal the rift between us. Still, I couldn't ignore the pain in her voice, the sincerity that seemed to be there now. "I've been angry," I said softly. "Angry at you, at Jason, at myself. I let myself be blind to what was happening right in front of me. But I've also realized something else. I'm not the only one who's been hurt. You've been hurt too, Claire." She looked up at me, tears glistening in her eyes. "I was trying to protect you, Mom. I was trying to protect us. But I ended up protecting the wrong person. I'm sorry. I don't know if you'll ever forgive me, but I want to try. I want to be the daughter you always deserved." The words I had longed to hear were finally spoken, but hearing them didn't make everything magically better. I wasn't sure if forgiveness could be that simple. But it was a start, a step in the right direction. "I don't know if I can forgive you yet," I said, the words catching in my throat. "But I'm willing to try, Claire. We have to rebuild, but it's going to take time. It's going to take a lot of work." She nodded, wiping away a tear. "I'll do whatever it takes, Mom. I just need you to know that I love you, and I want to make this right." The conversation didn't fix everything in an instant, but it felt like a turning point. Maybe forgiveness wouldn't come overnight. Maybe it would take months, years even. But for the first time in a long while, I felt like we had a chance. And that was all I needed. As I walked home later that day, I realized that moving forward wasn't just about rebuilding trust. It was about finding peace within myself. It was about understanding that I couldn't change the past, but I could control how I responded to it. And that, in itself, was a form of healing. I didn't know what the future held, but I knew this: no matter what, I would be okay. And so would my family. We had faced the darkness together, and now we had the chance to find the light. It had been months since the court case. And things between Claire and me had settled into something new, something fragile but real. We still had a long way to go, but I could see the effort in her eyes, hear it in her voice when she called, or when she came over to visit. We were rebuilding, piece by piece. It wasn't perfect, but it was a start. As for Jason, well, I hadn't seen him since that fateful day in court. His apology had been the first step in his own reckoning, and though I didn't believe it was enough to erase everything, I knew that I couldn't control his actions anymore. I'd spent too many years trying to fix things for everyone else. It was time to focus on myself. Time to heal. One evening, I sat alone in the living room, watching the light fade from the windows as the sun set. I couldn't help but think about everything I'd been through, the lies, the betrayal, the courtroom battle, and how much had changed. I had lost things I'd never get back, but I had also gained something far more valuable: my own strength. I smiled to myself as I thought about how far I'd come. There was a time when I would have let Jason's words define me. There was a time when I would have crumbled under the weight of his betrayal, letting the pain take over. But not anymore. I had gotten the last laugh. Not in a cruel, vindictive way, but in the way that matters most, by standing up for myself, by finding the strength to speak my truth and demand justice. I had taken back my dignity, my self-worth, and the respect I deserved. Jason had thought he could break me, but he had underestimated me. And in the end, it wasn't the court ruling or the money that mattered, it was the power I had found within myself. I leaned back in my chair, looking around the room. It was still the same cozy space I had always loved, but now it felt different, like it had been scrubbed clean, both physically and emotionally. My family had been shaken, but we were still standing. And that was enough for me. I picked up the phone and dialed Claire's number, feeling a small pang of hope that maybe, just maybe, we were starting to heal. The call rang a few times before she answered, her voice warm and familiar. "Hey, Mom," she said, her tone lighter than I'd heard it in months. "How's it going?" "Better," I said, a smile creeping onto my face. "Better than I ever thought it would be." There was a pause on the other end, and then Claire's voice, soft and sincere, came through. "I'm really sorry, Mom. For everything. I'm just glad we're getting through this together." "Me too," I replied, my heart full. "And no matter what, we'll get through it. We're stronger now, Claire. And nothing's going to break us." I hung up the phone, feeling a sense of peace wash over me. The road to healing was long, and the scars would always remain. But I was no longer the woman I was before Jason's betrayal. I was someone who had faced the worst of it and come out the other side stronger than I ever thought possible. The last laugh wasn't about revenge or proving someone wrong. It was about reclaiming my life and my dignity. And as I sat there, in the quiet of my home, I knew that I had done just that.